Hey guys, Mr. Thibodeau here. So, get ready for it. We got um, the most incorrect thing that I have read in this book is in today's lesson. Let's see if we'll show up for a second. All right, here we go. So, we got some stuff here. First off, most of it's pretty good. Okay, legacy of the Maya. Um, the Mayans were exceptional architects as well as mathematicians. Um, they were able to come up with a lot of really important things, including the use of zero. They were able to come up with their own 365-day calendar. Okay, and I really want to ask you the question: how did the Mayans, way over in South America, come up with the same 365-day calendar that the people in the West were going to come up with? Why did they both come up with 365 days? How did they manage to both get that same day, same days for the calendar? So I want you to think a little bit about that. I also want you to, in fact, actually go ahead and answer in the comments below, okay? I want to see what you come up with. So archaeologists are always learning more stuff about this. In fact, actually, one of my cousins through marriage is a Mayan and Aztec archaeologist, and she goes there pretty frequently to learn all about this stuff, which is really fascinating. They had their own paper that they used, or sort of tree bark paper called a Codex. Unfortunately, most of the Spanish conquistadors destroyed a lot of them. I do want to again point out that the Mayans had a pretty successful fight against the conquistadors and really made it difficult for them. However, the disease that was brought with the Spanish made resistance ultimately futile. If you think America is struggling after a virus that kills 3% of the population, imagine a virus that killed up to 90% of the population. It was a truly horrible time. So it really, puts things into perspective, I think. I think most of this is pretty good. We have a little bit of their writings and stuff, which is important. We see the Aztec Empire, which is mostly in Central America, where the Mexico is now. I do think it's important. Tenochtitlan was a absolutely beautiful city. It was a city on this lake. It had fresh water. It had running water. Everyone had indoor plumbing. It was huge as well. It was as big as Paris at the time, which Paris was one of the biggest cities in Europe, and yet everyone there had enough to eat and had running water. Parisians did not have running water. They did not have a sewer system. Yet Tenochtitlan did. Tenochtitlan was as magnificent of a city and perhaps more gorgeous, according to many accounts of the soldiers who had been in both Paris and here. Truly fantastic. Unfortunately, of course, the Spanish are going to wreck all that. I also will point out that the Aztec Empire, were not nice people. The Aztecs conquered a lot, and they really, really believed in blood sacrifices. They murdered hundreds of thousands of people for sacrifices throughout their time. Not good folks. And in fact, when we get to over here, right, and we see some of the deaths, these are, by the way, not actual skulls. The skulls might be behind them, but those are, of course, not what skulls actually look like. So those are just stone representations. The Aztecs were, fantastic warriors, but they also, their prolific human sacrifices made them a lot of enemies. When we get to this, so this right here is probably the most incorrect statement I have read in this whole dang book. Okay. Although few in number, they were able to overpower the Aztecs with superior weapons such as guns and cannons, and as well as horses. Okay, the Aztec warriors armed with spear throwers and swords were no match for Spanish conquistadors. Absolute garbage, 100% inaccurate. The Aztecs were 100% capable of stopping the Spanish, and they did. They stopped them numerous times. There was not just one battle where the Spanish just like came in and won. Guns are not that good right now. Guns are basically garbage. Okay, they're sort of good. They're capable. You don't have to be very skilled to use them, which is one of the benefits. They're very scary. They're very loud, but they're crazy inaccurate. Those spear throwers takes a lot of practice to use and to do right. However, those spear throwers are also very capable of killing a man. The Aztecs were more than capable and did have many successes against the Spanish. Okay, there's two main reasons why the Spanish are going to win. And it has nothing to do with most of these things. Okay, I will say horses were important. Horses failed miserably many times when they were fought in close quarters. However, when the Spanish finally got a fight against the Aztecs on plains, on flat ground, they did quite well. The horses really showed how useful they were, and the Aztecs lost that fight. But guns and cannons were not very helpful. Okay, the Aztecs did not have walls in the same way that other Europeans had, so the cannons weren't as useful there. They mostly just got bogged down and slowed the Spanish. The guns were not nearly as helpful as the crossbows that the Spanish had. Swords, the steel swords that the Spanish had, were really useful, and the steel armor that the Spanish had was really useful, but none of that is mentioned here because this book is apparently stupid. Sorry, I'm really dislike this. This is such a backwards and such an archaic view that simplifies a very complex issue. The other thing is, it talks about just a little bit that some of the Aztecs joined the conquistadors' leader Cortez in his battles. That is such a half-truth, because the only reason Cortez won was because when he showed up and started fighting the Aztecs, and first he was actually greeted as one of their gods, though there's evidence to believe that the Aztecs didn't actually think he was one of the gods, but they thought he was Quetzalcoatl, or some of them did anyway. And so he was brought into Tenochtitlan, where he then decided to take Montezuma, or Moctezuma, there's both different ways of writing his name, hostage, thinking he was a king in the way that the Europeans were. That's not how Aztec society really works, so it didn't actually work because he is actually an elected official to some extent. The other thing is that Hernan Cortez would have lost so hard if he had not gotten the other tribes under the Aztecs to revolt. The only reason the Aztecs fell is because all of their people that they had been dominating and murdering and using for human sacrifices decided, hey, we've had enough. Let's overthrow these jerks. Okay, and the most important thing that allowed Hernan Cortez to win is, again, the disease. Okay, 90% of the Aztecs died from disease. That ruined any chance that they had of creating meaningful combat to the Spanish. And in fact, we see before the disease fully spread, the Spanish were losing. They were absolutely losing. They were not winning against the Aztecs. The Aztecs were great warriors, and the guns and stuff that the Spanish had was not actually like what we have today. It wasn't like they came in with an assault rifle. They came in with these blunderbuss, these very slow to load, inaccurate weapons that were powerful, but against a bunch of people who had the numbers and had skill, they were not going to be the deciding factor. Okay. This is really frustrating to me because it is very, very inaccurate. if it was not for the disease, if it was not for the fact that the natives revolted, the Spanish would not have won. Okay, the Spanish guns and the Spanish cannon were not that helpful. The horses were helpful. The Spanish crossbows and the Spanish swords, steel swords, were absolutely helpful. Those were way better and very useful. The obsidian swords that the Aztecs used were way sharper than any steel sword, but they were brittle and they would break, so especially against armor. Okay, so Aztecs were not a great people. Well, they were a great people. They were not a good people. Okay, again, we get back to this idea of greatness and goodness. You can be great without being good, and these guys right here are a good example of that, because they were not good people. They did great things. They did really world-changing things, but they were also monsters who murdered a lot of people. Okay. Yeah, I cannot believe that this is so backwards here. Anyway, so that's frustrating. So really pay attention to that. Anyway, have a good one, guys, and remember to write in the comments below. Have a good one. Bye.